Hello, it's better to talk. I'd love to welcome you back to today's episode, which is when I'm going to be exploring whether my brother did take his own life or whether something else happened, whether it was an accident, whether it was possibly somebody had broken in and there'd been a fight. Who knows? So that's what we're going to be covering today. Hello, my name's Helen Garlick. For 35 years, I was a family lawyer and mediator, but I kept secret what was happening in my own family of origin. Now I know it's time to talk about it. So I'd like to warmly welcome you to Hello, it's better to talk. So when I came back from St. Louis, and my father was maintaining that it had been an accident, I could see so easily, it was written plainly on my parents' faces, how incredibly painful this was. I mean, we didn't have huge amounts of eye contact. Everybody was kind of looking at the floor. We were all, as everybody is, going through their own pathway of grief and pain and denial and intense hurt and then numbness and then not being able to sleep or sleeping for ages, not being able to eat. Actually, you didn't eat a lot at all. And the process was starting to evolve about finding out what had happened to David. So my father said to me one day, we need to go over to the house. Will you come with me? Now, everything was screaming in me to say no, but I could see how incredibly hard this was for my father. And my mother was so withdrawn into herself, there was no way that, she could have done that. So I did go with him to this remote country mansion, Bothamsall Hall, near Retford in Nottinghamshire. And we were due to meet the police over there. So we drove up to this mansion. I remember seeing three people outside. There was two women, one was a sort of a toddler in one of those big old prams watching us. And that was one of the examples when I suddenly realised that people kept watching as if we were some kind of story unfolding that they couldn't not watch. So people were staring, but then pretending not to stare, but then staring again. So we drove in and I didn't want to go into the house, but I knew I had to. So I did. And I kind of took in the room by just little glances. I couldn't look at it all in one go. It was too painful. But so he died in the green room. His body had been taken away by that time. But there were still pieces of my brother in an ark in the room, with a big splodge on one wall. And there was a light shade knocked over. There were a lot of empty bottles, and the French windows to that room were also open. So that was leading to my father's view that somebody had broken in and this had happened. So I didn't see my brother's body at that point in time. But the police did their investigations not very well, as it turned out. They didn't do fingerprints, and I thought that my father thought that was terrible at the time because he thought they should be doing a murder investigation. Apparently it's quite common for the police not to do those sorts of investigations when they already have come to the view that it was a suicide. So the police did their investigations, the matter was referred to the coroner, and then there was the first inquest, which happened 3 days after my birthday in 1981. Not that makes any difference. And despite what my father had told me, that it was going to be an obvious that it was going to be an accidental death, in fact, the decision of the first inquest, the first coroner, was that my brother had taken his own life, which my father described to me when he phoned me to tell me about that as a travesty of justice. The coroner had 6 cases to deal with on that day. He was a man that was actually known to my father, and they were not friends. Harry Thompson and my father were not friendly at all. Harry Thompson was a little man, rather like a Captain Mannering man from Dad's army, and my father thought that there may be some human, I don't know, some kind of wish to hurt him, I don't know. So the job of an inquest is to find out who the person was that died, when and where they died, the medical reason for their death, and what had happened. And the verdict of the first inquest was that my brother had taken his own life. Now that day it was a Friday, and there were 6 other cases to deal with. The coroner seemed to be very rushed, my father told me, and he said that the outcome was a travesty of justice and that we had to fight this as a family to obliterate the stain on David's character. It's so hard when you're going through the struggle of losing a sibling, also to have that element of shame. Shame is a terrible thing for anybody, and I think my father must have felt it very deeply. I felt it very deeply. It felt as if we had all been tainted with this awful brush. And I supported my father in what he was doing. Also, however, I was having to hold my own secret because I was fairly sure that my brother had done what he had done. My brother had a funeral down in Cornwall, in North Cornwall, where the family had had a cottage, a holiday home. And it was a terrible day. The clouds were so low you felt like you could touch them. And there was wind and rain and crows flying around. It was like some terrible apocalyptic scene. And my brother's coffin was carried by 6 of his friends. Really hard for them. They were all about 20. And afterwards, one of his friends, who I call in the book Nick Kane, couldn't be found. But I did eventually find him. So I went looking for him and found him just on Revel Field, where he was distraught, and I was hearing him say, "No, no." So I did, what you need to do is, I suppose, as a human being, I reached out to him and said, "Tell me what happened. Tell me, Nick." And he told me that he and my brother had talked about taking their own lives. They both had difficult relationships with their fathers, and that was what they talked about one night. He said, "But I never thought he'd do it. I never thought he'd do it." It became clear to me when I talked to him more that he was still thinking that he would have to do it. And in my head, I started imagining that there was some kind of suicide pact between them. And I felt that I couldn't let this young man die as well, not on my watch. So even though he was my brother's best friend, so he was kind of taboo, I had a relationship with him. Now, that was not difficult. He was gorgeous, a wonderful man, green-eyed, long blonde hair, and in a bad place. So I knew myself that it was very likely that David had taken his own life, but I also knew that to reveal that to my parents and make them face that would take away the thing that was getting them through their lives, which was a kind of a make-believe that there had been an accident. So I kept this secret for a very long time, nearly 40 years now. But I knew that one day I would write about what had happened to David. And in 1981, I made that promise to myself. One day you'll write about this. So thank you for listening. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 12 noon for the next episode of Hello, It's Better to Talk, when I'll be talking about the second inquest and what happened there. In the meantime, love and light to you all.